What role do universities play in the sustainability agenda, both in terms of education and in terms of operations? I think a very critical role. First of all, it is to state that universities, of course, have two roles specifically, research and education. But in the second area, I think it's very clear that future business leaders, future leaders of organizations go through academic institutions. And when we look at the business sector, it has a very important role to play when it comes to sustainable development. The current framework that the UN has set out, the Sustainable Development Goals, clearly talk about partnerships and the role that business has in achieving the Sustainable Development Agenda. So educational institutions, and specifically business schools, in my view, have a very clear role of sensitizing the current student population about what role can business play, not only in making money, but also in solving big social and environmental problems. How successful have universities been so far in this agenda? I can only speak about my perspective from the perspective of the UN-backed Principles for Responsible Management Education, the initiative which I'm leading out of the UN Global Compact Office. This initiative has started in 2007, and we are currently in 2016 engaging over 650 business schools in 83 countries. The universe of business schools is not as big as one would anticipate. There are approximately 10,000 business schools, but most of them, half of them, are in China and India alone. So if we talk about 650 business schools with our growth rate going to 1,000 schools by 2020, that's our intended target, we are already seeing some tipping points in reach in at least a few countries. I would point to the UK and Ireland, for example, where half of the business schools are working with us. Numbers itself don't talk about impact. I would say that there is a wide spectrum of engagement. I could say in the majority of cases, we still see a very basic engagement. CSR courses, CSR electives have certainly become mainstream, but the business school's mission statements or the strategy have only changed in the case of a very few number of business schools we are aware of. So there is still room for growth, but we certainly see that both in terms of student demand, but also increasingly the demand from business, there is a case to be made for universities and specifically business schools to come on board more forcefully and see that their impact in terms of curriculum change, but also aligning the research becomes more strongly aligned with sustainable development and in our case, responsible management education. I'm optimistic because I see that an increasing number of students are looking for this type of purpose-driven education. I'm also realistic that change in academic institutions is slow. It is much slower than we anticipated when we started the project, Principles for Responsible Management Education. But that is not to say that we're giving up. So I think it is a slow-moving process, a variety of factors, the faculty buy-in, leadership buy-in, but also the organizational change that has to happen through a variety of actors in a university. All that has to come together, and that's much slower than in other organizations such as companies. So I do see progress. I see slower progress than expected, but yes, I'm optimistic that we are moving in the right direction. When I started studying, my question was, what is the role of business in society? And I think many students ask the same questions, not just particular to what the role of business is, but what is their specific role when they enter the job market. I think many students I talk about they want to both align their values and what they work on. And I think this is a current trend in this generation. So I think sustainability gives you the answer to that because it can align the values that many students express with the need, of course, for having a job, but aligning these two can be found through sustainability or corporate responsibility. So I would say students care about this because they care about what their effects are in whichever organization or company they will end up in. The Sustainable Development Goals have just launched at the beginning of this year. This is the 15-year strategy that the United Nations, together with all member states, have set up. This was a very inclusive process over the last 4 years, since 2012, since the world met in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil in 2012 at the Earth Summit. There was a huge undertaking literally millions of people and organizations and all 193 member states of the UN came together and figured that 17 goals are the agenda on sustainable development for the next 15 years. We're talking about a very inclusive agenda that will include both the global north and the south, because the previous agreement, the Millennium Development Goals, focused mostly on poverty reduction and the global south. Now we're also talking about consumer patterns and consumer behavior in the global north in order to really come to grips to the big, very, very complex challenges when we talk about sustainable development. So I'm very hopeful that the Sustainable Development Goals can be guiding posts for governments, but also very importantly for companies. And we are seeing a lot of activities now specifically driven by the UN Global Compact. We have made ourselves, we have given ourselves the slogan, making the Sustainable Development Goals local business. We are seeing a lot of activities right now driven by the UN Global Compact and its partners. And for universities and business schools, we have also now started to see more engagement through the Principles for Responsible Management Education, where we're saying the Sustainable Development Goals should be the guiding posts for universities and business schools who want to engage with us. So the SDGs have a driving force in our vision for universities and business schools when they want to engage with us. What else can CBS do? I think there's always room for improvement. I was very impressed here over the last couple of days to see what has happened already over the last years. So I'm first of all congratulating the school for progress, but of course there's more to do. So I think really looking at the targets you have set yourself in terms of how to integrate responsible management education throughout the entire curriculum is an ongoing effort, and I encourage the school and Copenhagen Business School to do more on that. And then more importantly, look at the Sustainable Development Goals as your umbrella through which you want to see what next you want to do. So these 16 thematic goals and the goal on partnership, the 17th Sustainable Development Goal can give you some ideas about what is next in terms of your engagement in the sustainability agenda, and more specifically also with CBS's engagement in the Principles for Responsible Management Education.